Joining us now to talk about the president's visit to Connecticut's Quinnipiac University is political science professor Scott Mclean. Thank you so much for being with us.
It's great to see you, Kara. I'm happy to be here.
I was just interviewing Senator Dodd, who said, I said, this is only the second time a sitting president has visited University of Connecticut, and the last time was Bill Clinton. He actually said it's an anniversary, like it happened on this day. So a lot of history being made with a president visiting Connecticut. And again, always an important thing when they visit a state university, right?
Oh, yeah, it's a flagship university, and the Dodd Center is a fantastic facility. I mean, I've done my own research there. It's a great campus. I think it's wonderful that the president is going to be there. Certainly an inconvenience for people driving cars in the area or students who need to get to class, but how can you turn down a chance to have the president of the United States come to your campus?
Yeah, brings whether you like his politics or not, having the president visit Connecticut certainly puts us in the spotlight. And I want to talk a little bit about where we're at with this, because Connecticut's being used as the stage to propose some new policies like universal pre-K or affordable childcare, even free childcare. What can you say about the likelihood of some of that getting done?
Well, I mean, I think it's true that Connecticut is one of the models for making sure that coronavirus relief money gets put towards really beneficial things for families, like childcare. But we also have to think about how the state has been able to support things like nutrition, housing for people in urban centers who are suffering homeless through the pandemic, and things like that. So one of the things that Connecticut did that other states were not able to or not willing to do was to take that relief money and really invest it in supporting childcare, and really to help support people get back to work. So this is exactly what Biden's message is. This is exactly what he's hoping will count in people's minds as infrastructure, right? That makes it possible for people to, contribute economically to our economy and find jobs and have choices in the kinds of jobs you can take.
I think a lot of people are worried about the economy, right? And we know, I'll put on my old poli-sci student hat, that back when we were taught, it was some of these programs, whether after wars, when we put people back to work to even help build and clean national parks. And we have a history of putting people back to work and building infrastructure and saying that does great for the economy. Based on what you know, is that sort of this generation's of let's get back to work? And we can, not just childcare, but some of the major highways in Connecticut could change as well. And does it historically work?
Well, I think Kara, the analogy is really interesting because, it's sad to say, but we've lost more than 600,000 lives to this pandemic. It's a bigger loss than I think almost every war we've ever had in this country, and yet we are exiting that period more divided than we've ever been before after any of these wars. And I think that is truly the challenge, to think of the pandemic as a war that we have fought and won, and now it's time to invest in our infrastructure. I think that's Biden's idea, but he faces a divided Congress. There's irreconcilable differences going on in our political system, and I think that just adds to the challenge that he has taken on. It's never been done before in quite this way, with this narrow of a margin in the Congress to work with.
So when you're teaching political science and history, which goes with political science, to your students, you feel like, at least right now, what we're looking at is a little bit uncharted waters compared to where you say, well, this happened before and that happened before, and look how that turned out.
Yeah, and I think you're right, Kara. It's an old playbook, right? The president wants to unify the country around infrastructure, around investments that everyone benefits, regardless of their party, regardless of region. And yet, in this case, this is exceedingly difficult. And it's never, there's really no historical parallel to the time we're going through right now when it comes to how to pass an infrastructure bill this large with this little support from one of the political parties. And I think what Joe Biden wants to do here in Connecticut is just to communicate that, yes, it can be done. Here are the benefits of doing it. Look at how it's benefiting people in Connecticut. And I think his argument will be, we can have this for the whole country, and we need to keep this momentum going and not let it stall out. That's his argument. I think the Republicans will have a different point of view and will want to not spend all that kind of money on childcare and just focus on bricks and mortar kinds of infrastructure projects.
Yeah, well, and Quinnipiac is always known for its polls. And just 3 days ago, we got a look at President Biden's approval rating, which it was hitting a new low of 38%. That's a lot lower than Obama was at this point in his presidency. Based on the surveys that you've done, how is that factoring into everything right now?
I think you've already implied, yes, it definitely doesn't help Biden's case before Congress when he comes at them with a very divided country and he's at 38% approval. Yes, it is Quinnipiac, but I do want to say that that's kind of an outlier poll. It's slightly higher in other polls, and we'll see how things develop. Things may turn around for Biden's job approval once we get further out of the pandemic. We're starting to see some hopeful signs there on the number of infections starting to surprisingly go down a little bit right now. I think also Biden desperately needs a win. And so passing this infrastructure bill, I think, will definitely help his standing with the public. But we also are in a situation where you can almost count of half the country, pretty close to it, being disappointed with the president in office. The old idea of a bipartisan job approval rating is almost a thing of the past, where Republicans will almost reflexively have a poor rating for a Democratic president, and Democrats give a poor rating to a Republican president. And so it is what it is, and I think Biden is working on it partly by coming here to Connecticut.
We're just taking a live view right now of the Dodd Center for Human Rights, where the president is heading to give his speech. How important do you think is Connecticut, as he certainly is speaking to some friendly territory? Our governor considers him a friend. Our congressional delegation is Democratic. But as he speaks outside, as these words go out to the nation today, and as you said, he needs a win. How does Connecticut factor into that? Will people just dismiss it that, well, we're Connecticut, and of course people like that there?
Right. I mean, that is a bit of a head scratcher. This is not a swing state. There are not swing voters to turn. There are no wavering Democrats or angry Republicans who are our congressional representatives and senators. And I think he's just really saying, this is what you could have. You could have this kind of success in childcare investment. But I can't be a mind reader for why President Biden is here. I think sometimes the simplest answer is the most personal one. He's good friends with Chris Dodd. The Human Rights Center at UConn is a fantastic facility, and it gives President Biden an opportunity to talk about a lot of the issues that he wants to talk about, thinking of childcare as part of that human rights penumbra and an umbrella. Gives him a chance to talk about infrastructure. I think it's an interesting choice of a place to come. It's not the typical kind of presidential visit where you might see a more overtly political persuasion job being done on decision makers in the state. But I think it's the kind of place where Biden feels comfortable and can really make his argument.
And like you said, he might have just wanted to really be there for his very good friend who's having a big moment in his life, because Senator Dodd and now President Biden go back a long way since they spent so much time in Congress, and both have said that they were close and have this close relationship. So, but in any event, it's spotlighting what Connecticut is doing with Quinnipiac, with UConn, with our child care system. I'm curious, as you try and, what's the conversation like? Our country's so divided, but when you're teaching in a poli-sci class now, what's the mood? What's the question? What's the feeling of what young students really want to focus on right now?
I just think there's a lot of anxiety among younger people, especially college-age younger people. And I think that transcends these barriers of left and right. Across the spectrum, people are concerned about where our country is. They're concerned about the state of race relations in the country. They're concerned about the stability of our governmental system when it's so extremely polarized, and that there have been, riots and breaching of the Capitol, and all of these things are really concerning to students. But I think there's also an optimism, that 18 to 25-year-old group, we call them the Gen Zs. Gen Z is actually fairly optimistic compared to some millennials. This younger group really sees a lot more promise. They're a lot more diverse, and they're a lot more interested in politics and being voters and participating and contributing to the country. So I see a lot of hopefulness right now on college campuses, especially Quinnipiac.
That's great. And so Gen Z, if you're in college right now, you would be considered Gen Z?
Yes.
Okay. Because I have kids who consider themselves Gen Z also, and they're much younger, but you're right. They're very aware, maybe because of social media, TikTok, everything. They're aware of Black Lives Matter. They're aware of what's going on. They may not be as educated as they need to be at ages 12 and 13 and 14, but they're probably much more aware because of all that they're seeing in their social media feeds all the time.
Yes, this older group, Kara, that is just about to enter college or already in college, just like my son and your kids, just like, really, really locked into social media. But I think they're also very aware of what's going on in the country. And I tend to be an eternal optimist about the young people of this country because I see so many good things on the UConn campus when I visit there, at the Quinnipiac campus, and other places that I go. And talk to students. It's there is light at the end of this long, dark tunnel that we seem to be in right now.
Well, and President Biden himself just said that he had told his brain aneurysm doctor that he was an eternal optimist, that the doctor called him a congenital optimist. So he's just now in Hartford, he did say that, I know people think this is going to be hard and we probably won't get 3.2 trillion, but we're going to get this done, and we're going to do this. But you raise an interesting point that I certainly have spoken to members of Congress who say it's the idea of the spirit of compromise is different now. In fact, they sometimes get lambasted or criticized if they even hint that they might want to compromise. And that's something different that's probably pretty problematic of these times, right?
Oh, absolutely. Both parties in Congress have polarized, maybe a little more on the Republican side than the Democratic side, depending on which study you look at, but they're both polarized. But I think that's a reflection of some of the polarization that's going on in our country. People much more identify as either Democrat or Republican, and they tend to think that the other side, can't be trusted or can't be worked with, or that they'll refuse to work with those other people, or see them as just as competitors in politics rather than enemies or something like that. So we have a long way to go in this country towards finding common ground. And I think even though Biden himself, as president, promised to find that common ground, and he hasn't really found it yet, he continues to talk about it. And I think that, Biden playing the long game on finding that common ground is a positive thing. Giving up and just entrenching both political parties in this kind of a gridlock situation is really not the solution. that the country needs long term. That's just my opinion, though.
Well, and I'm looking at the Quinnipiac poll now because I know it's just a capture in time, but let's talk about the pandemic. Biden was getting pretty high marks for the pandemic, then it started to go down and then back up. And so how much of this really depends on how people are feeling about the pandemic?
Oh, yes, I think a lot. I think, the poor management of the withdrawal from Afghanistan also plays into that. Let's not forget that. But the pandemic is the number one issue for so many people. And just depending on vaccination rates and kids being able to go back to school, whether they're masked or not, and those kinds of issues, and the more they come to the forefront, just raise the concern. And it is unstable. It's an unstable assessment that the general public makes about where we are with COVID. And it will take time. I think one of the turning points for me is yet to come. All of us, or most of us, have expected that the pandemic will sort of have another surge in November, December when it gets cold again. If that doesn't happen, and we're pleasantly surprised that we are getting a handle on COVID, that's going to tremendously benefit Biden's standing with the public. And we are, if you look at the headlines today, we are starting to see some surprising decline in the surge that we've been seeing lately. So, it's very unpredictable. And I think, as you said, Kara, it's just a matter of Biden plodding his way through this and just grinding it out. And his presidency, I think, really will be known as the grind presidency.
The grind. Okay. Now,
grind.
Yeah. So Governor Lamont has said it's good to have a friend in the White House. Can we expect that we're going to benefit more because these plans involve Connecticut being a great example? We need a lot of money to redo I-84 and I-91. There's a lot of things infrastructure-wise that they're talking about.
Right. The I-95, I-84 interchange that happens in Connecticut, something that's a project that we want to do here and try to improve the infrastructure and also create jobs for people here in Connecticut. There's also the effort to make more efficient the commuter rail line between Boston and New York that runs through Connecticut. There's a lot to be done on that front as well. We have a lot of bridges that are crumbling in the state. So even on a basic sort of bricks and mortar kind of infrastructure package that's going through Congress and actually supported by both parties in Congress, Connecticut stands to reap a lot of benefits from that. As you know, the big contentious part is about, for lack of a better term, human infrastructure, child care, unemployment, child benefit that's built into the other part of that Build Back Better agenda of Biden. And that is very contentious. But we stand to benefit from that too. And I think that's part of why people are looking to Biden's visit as a way to highlight what Connecticut has done with that kind of money from the federal government.
Right, as an example of how it can work. But certainly, as we know, other states may not see that as the way to do things. So we'll have to see what happens. Is there anything specific that you'll be teaching your students tomorrow after this speech today? What are you looking for?
Really looking at the rhetoric of how does the president tie together human rights at the Dodd Center, physical infrastructure, and this kind of social infrastructure, and how they're all tied together. One of the things that's been actually disappointing from a political communication standpoint for me is how much both the media and members of Congress have talked about the price tag of infrastructure rather than how the country can benefit long-term from something like this. And so Biden has been trying to change the way we talk about these things by uniting the moral ideas of human rights and democracy the physical infrastructure with this idea of building back better. And the better part for Biden, anyway, is the social part of it. And how to tie that together has been something's been very elusive for the Democrats in Congress. And so we'll see how Biden shapes that language.
Well, I guess it's a crystal ball question. We'll have to see. The president seems like he's very optimistic. I'll give you a moment before we're going to end up ending some of our coverage for a little bit until the president comes to speak at UConn. But what are some of as far as what you're teaching for political science right now, is it, are more students still deciding that they want to go into politics? Are they taking those courses, or are they feeling disaffected by what we see?
Well, again, I'm the eternal optimist, and there's evidence for it. Political science at Quinnipiac is booming. Where other parts of the university are, basically where they are 2 years ago. Quinnipiac's political science program is growing. We're developing a signature course on politics and polling that I'll be teaching next semester. It's going to be very exciting. We have the largest group that we've ever had from Quinnipiac going to study for a semester in Washington and doing public policy work, working in interest groups in the halls of Congress. And so I have every reason, at least from where I sit here on the campus of Quinnipiac University, to see that the future is bright for our civic health and young people.
All right. Well, I like the eternal optimism. I tend to be a glass half full person myself. We want to thank you for sharing your time and your insight with us on this day of a presidential visit to Connecticut. Thank you, Scott.
Sure thing, Kara. It's great to see you again.
You too.